November is just around the corner, and that means the 16th Annual National Podcast Post Month is fast approaching. Hi, I'm Jennifer Navarrete, founder of NaPodPomo, and I'm inviting you to join the 30-day Global Podcasting Challenge. Whether you're a newbie looking to start your first podcast or a seasoned pro seeking inspiration, NaPodPomo is the perfect place to experiment and try new things. Visit napodpomo.org to learn more. See where podcasting can take you this November during National Podcast Post Month.
You haven't started your story and it's been on your mind and in your heart to write this for years, just start. And do not compare yourself when you first start. I didn't know what I was doing when I started, but I just had a story that needed to come out and characters who had a voice that needed to be told. So just start, and you never know where it's gonna lead you. And it may be a 10-year journey, or it may be like in 2 years you've got something and it's going to be published on a bookshelf one day. So you never know. Don't discount yourself.
Okay, everyone, welcome back to Living the Next Chapter. I have with me today another author. It's exciting. I've spoken with her cohort from her podcast. Angela's been on the show. Stephanie is here now, and we're going to be talking about her author journey, what she's up to, the amazing things that she writes about, and also she helps people with their writing journey, which is great because we have new authors listening to this podcast. Get out your pen and paper because we're going to make some notes today. Stephanie, welcome to Living the Next Chapter. Glad to have you here.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's exciting. So you do have a podcast with your cohort, Angela. Tell us a little bit about your podcast. What's it all about?
Well, it's pretty new, and it is basically a nerdy space for us to chat about world building, fantasy, all the fantasy books we love, storycraft. We love just talking about books. So we decided, let's start a podcast where we can nerd out about our own stories and stories that we have loved over the years. And we are hoping to start our interviews soon. So we'll be having author interviews coming next month. So we're really excited to be able to meet some writers that we know and new authors who we haven't had a chance to meet yet.
Are you learning anything about yourself now that you're a podcaster? Is it teaching you anything?
Oh, gosh. Getting in front of the camera more, because I'm a big introvert, and being in front of a camera is not my favorite thing to do. And so, the prospect of starting a podcast was really daunting. I'll just say that up front. So when Angela and I were talking about it, it's like, I'll only do this if you're doing it with me. I need a co-host, and it was so much fun. It's fun having a co-host. It's fun being able to banter and go back and forth. So that's what I have learned, that I get more comfortable when I have a friend with me, a partner who I can run with.
Smart. That's a great way to start a podcast. And it's nice to do something together with a friend. That's always good. So good job. I've been listening to the show. I love it. So you're going to see some Canadian listeners in your stats. That's probably me. I'm one of those.
Awesome.
So it's a great podcast.
Thank you.
Really, really fun. And I love how the two of you go back and forth. You both have your own opinions on things, and you might even differ on some topics, but you do bring out the best in each other. So it's a really fun podcast to listen to.
Thanks. I'm so glad you're enjoying it.
Awesome. Okay, let's talk about your background and your writing history. Tell us a little bit about how this all started for you as an author. Always like to kind of get that origin story, which leads us into our conversation today.
Right. So I was not a child who thought I'm going to one day become a writer and be an author. That was not like my dream or anything like that. But I always say that the storyteller was there from a young age. So I was always crafting stories with my younger sister, and that was kind of where it was birthed in me, that I did have a gift for storytelling. And it really wasn't until probably my mid-20s that I really delved into writing. And it was when a friend who was a fantasy nerd and a Star Wars nerd, because I love Star Wars and Lord of the Rings, he's like, you need to write your own fantasy book. You have read so much, you have so much knowledge, so you just need to do it. And sometimes that's what we need. We really need someone to just tell us, you can do this, and you got to do it. So that's what happened. I kind of went home from there and just started a story that had been on my mind for like a year. It had originated from a dream. And I did nothing with it, maybe just like wrote a couple pages, because in my mind, I'm thinking, I'm not a writer. I didn't go to college for creative writing. That was not in my mind at all. My background is art. I'm a fine art major and minored in European history. So like writing was not something I thought I was. But I started, and it was like I couldn't stop. Once this world had been open to me, I just had to get all the ideas down, and characters were coming to life, and they're, talking in your head. They kind of like exist in your imagination. And, fast forward like 6 years of doing this just on my own, just in my own little hemisphere of writing, I had like 6 books written, like epic fantasy. We're talking 150,000 words plus. So
wow,
big stuff. And so that's kind of how it started for me. Wasn't a part of a writer's group. It's really important to find people that you can mesh with and like get critique from. But like, I didn't know anybody else who was writing. So it was really a turning point for me when I did meet Angela. So I've only known her for a couple of years, but we were introduced from a mutual friend, and it's like, finally, I met someone who had written something that was also fantasy. Hers is historical fantasy, Arthurian legend. So I love that. But I thought, she wants to get published. I want to get published. I've been hearing people, for years, like, what do you get? You get your books published, huh? Which can be like irritating when you're like, I'm working on it. The whole publishing world was like something I knew nothing about. So I didn't even know how to start. But talking with Angela, like, she kind of knew the self-publishing route. And I'm like, I'm going to try and query. That's what I'm going to try. I'm going to try to go the traditional route. But now I had a teammate. I had a partner an accountability partner. We could, how are you doing with your route? And I'm like, I'm querying, I've sent out more query letters. And so we would just kind of check in with each other. So it really helped having somebody along the journey, because it can feel very alone when you're writing, you just kind of get sucked into your own little space. So it's important to have a few people that you trust who can help you along the way.
It's interesting because Angela brought up the exact same thing from her point of view about you, where the two of you would get on and start talking to each other, and you would say that you've written this many chapters or this many words. And she's like, oh, I got to catch up. And so it's like, she felt like she was kind of like trying to keep up with you, and this back and forth, and it inspired her as well. So I love that you both were helping each other at the same time. That's really cool.
It's not a competition. Like, no, that's the biggest thing I've learned in the writing community, like online and social media. There's no competition involved. Everybody just wants to encourage each other. So when someone lands an agent or somebody lands a publisher, it's like, everyone's just so excited, and, praise goes out. So I love that everyone's so encouraging.
It's a good space, and I love that. That's great to hear that stuff. Okay, so talk about world building for a moment. I'm really curious about how an author starts with a blank piece of paper and this whole world is created. Do you write like beginning, middle, end? Do you write end, middle, beginning? How do you kind of create this entire world that draws us in as readers? Really interested in how that happens.
I know some people jump around, and I think when I first started, I started with the beginning. I started at what I thought was the beginning of my story. And for me, it's always birthed with a character. I feel like my story can't start unless I have a character. And so for every book I've written, I have a character in mind, or it could be from a dream. Like all of a sudden I'm dreaming, and then there's 2 characters that show up, and I'm like, okay, this is interesting, and I need to know more about them. Like, who are they? And that kind of helps me then create a world around them. And I'll start off that way. I'll start off with character, going through their likes, dislikes, what's the struggle in the beginning, and if they have to go on a journey, you just kind of start that process. And with The Conjurer's Curse, which is my debut fantasy novel, it was very linear. I'll say that for sure. And maybe it's because by that time I had written 7 previous books that by now I'm like, okay, I can go, from plot A to B to C without any hiccups. And that's kind of how it was. It was smooth. But then after like the first arc, I guess, is done, the first act, that's when I kind of step back and think, all right, what's the next hurdle or problem he has to overcome? And I'll kind of brainstorm some ideas. And then if I know what has to happen next, then I can go into the middle chunk. and knowing that the ending is there and I just have to get to it. But with my first series, I jumped around. I started at the beginning and then I like leapt way ahead because I didn't really know where the story was going to go. I was so new at writing and I just wanted to focus on what was inspiring me at the time. So scenes that were in my head, I just wanted to get down. And so it was, like string points everywhere. If you're thinking of a very convoluted map, that's how it was. So it's probably why I just was in my own space during that season of just getting thoughts down, figuring out my voice. So by spending years developing my craft, I got to the point where I could just write a full-on 100,000K novel in 4 months. And that's how it was for The Conjurer's Curse. Like I had taken all that time to like get all the novice stuff out of the system so I could then be more streamlined later on.
Okay, that's interesting. Because I think a lot of people who are writers listening to this are at that spot where they're just trying to figure out what's going to work best for them, for their writing, and how they're going to approach their characters. Did you get stuck at all in the process of writing the book where you kind of painted yourself into a corner and the story took you to a spot where you're like, oh, okay, I don't know what's going to happen next?
Yeah. So with The Conjurer's Curse, I will say probably half the book is from one character's point of view, my main character. And then I got to a point where I realized I need to know what the antagonists are doing. Because usually, you need to have your bad guy or villain like antagonizing the protagonist. But I kind of reached a point where it's like, they're not going to be interacting. So I think I need to create a second character and a second point of view. I mean, the character is created, but like, I think I have to now go into my anti-hero's point of view, which was not planned. I'm a pantser, so I don't plot out everything. I usually have a loose idea of, okay, I have a cursed character. He needs to go on a journey to break his curse. That's simple. That's my outline.
There you go.
A one sentence idea. I don't know how he's going to do it. But eventually, you got to get to that finale. So I've reached like a point in the middle of the book where it's like, I need to know what the other side is doing and the other side's point of view and how it's going to, affect the hero. So there are times where, you just have to go with the creative process and like trust your instinct. And my instinct was this character, this anti-hero has a voice and it's very strong. And I need to develop this and go in so we can see the other side.
So, okay, let's give a general overview of the book then for readers. Now, we've talked to authors. Let's talk to readers. What are they going to discover about this character? What's they going to discover about the story? We're not going to give away everything, obviously, because that's why there's a book. But how can you kind of give us an overview of what we're going to find as a reader when we grab a copy of this, crack it open with our tea or coffee, we're ready to jump in. What are we going to find?
Well, it is a coming of age adventure about a 17-year-old albino warrior who has been born with a life-draining curse. So he exists in this rural, remote village, and he is not treated well. So he's ostracized because he's an albino, and there's a mysteriousness about him. Like people aren't sure that he's cursed, but there's something weird going on. So after enough people mysteriously die, he is banished from the village and has to go on a journey to find his true homeland because he's not actually from there. So he has to go on a journey to find his true homeland, hopefully break his curse, or he will continue to kill those around him and those he loves. So it is a story of like self-discovery, identity, the search for belonging. There's found family in it. There's juxtaposing like the hero and the anti-hero and how their own upbringing has kind of shaped their worldview and how they interact with people and their personalities. So forgiveness is involved. There's magic. There's hope. I always love a good hope, story in there.
Is this going to lead to further stories or is it a standalone book?
When I first wrote it, it was going to be a standalone because I set it in the same world as this other fantasy series that I have like 7 books in. And so it kind of morphed. It was just going to be a standalone. And then when I found my publisher, she read the whole thing and said, okay, let's talk about the ending because I see a series here. So maybe we could change it a little bit to make that to make it continue. And I thought, okay, yeah, let's do this. So there are more. The second book, The Race of Argent, is coming out this December. So the story continues. Yay. And I'm currently working on the third book. And I'll say I'm a little bit over halfway done with it. It's just sitting at 57,000 words. I know for some people that's a whole book, but I write epic fantasy. So most of my books are around the 100,000 word range. And I don't think it's going to end there. I have a feeling I'll need a fourth book.
Wow.
So a trilogy is out.
Well, that's good news. So you're going to have to come back and talk about the next releases as they come out. I'd love to have you back for that. Talk about building community around you as an author. One of the questions I get from other authors is, how can I build a community around my books? How can I interact with my community, my readers? What's worked for you as far as building that community feel around your work?
It started like local. So when I did meet Angela, we thought we need to have some other partners who would like to be writers, who think they have stories in them we want to encourage. So we started with like 6 people, and it's grown since then. So every month we have a writers gathering and we help encourage other writers and authors, and they can be poets, they could be artists, memoir writers. It's just a creative space to help encourage others. And that's on the local for me, which is wonderful, being able to go to something every month and interact with people face to face. Online, that's been kind of like the surprise, because I was no social media. As I was writing like the first 7 of my books, I was just, again, as I said, in my own world. But as soon as I got picked up by a publisher, it's like, oh gosh, I need to be on all these different platforms. And so I started just kind of connecting with other authors, and it's amazing the ones that you just leave a comment for, then you realize you have more in common. So their book sounds interesting, you read it, they think your book sounds interesting, they read it, and now you've got, friends all of a sudden. And I have met some wonderful writers online, and I adore them, just love what they're doing. So I do encourage people to find like-minded individuals, people who write in your same genre, and you can build a community that way. For readers, I found just kind of going on Facebook for me was reaching out and asking for beta readers for my stories, and inviting a few people in to actually have first access to the story, like ahead of time. So I have made wonderful friends that way too. People I don't know face to face who've become critique partners, beta readers, and I adore these people because they give me great feedback. You can get kind of blind and set in your own ways when you're writing your own story. Like, no, this is how it goes, and then a reader's like, well, from a reader's standpoint, I want to know this, or I think you could go more in depth here, or I think the beginning needs a little bit more hashing out. And it's like, oh, you're right, because 4 beta readers told me so. No, I love getting the feedback from actual writers and then just from the readers, because they'll have different takes, and both are essential, to the writing process.
That's a good mix. I really like that. Your beta readers, did they give you any other insight in addition to that really kind of helped shape the story at all?
I have one beta reader who's amazing. She literally kind of helped me inspire a character to write from her point of view. So in The Conjurer's Curse, I was just going to write from these 2 point of views, the hero and the anti-hero. And then it kind of came to, again, a place where like, oh, I need to go into this area and show what's happening with this character. And I would never have done that lest she said, hey, I think I think this character has a voice, and I would love to see what's happening from her perspective here. It's like, okay, let me do that. So she ended up this character got a couple of scenes. And then in the next book, she's now a main character. She has equal scenes, point of view scenes as the hero and the anti-hero. That may never have happened had I not had a beta reader be like, opinionated enough to tell me this, So
wow.
that can happen. And I really, really like when you get some beta readers who are like voicey enough to actually say something. And same thing I had in another book. She also encouraged me to slow things down in the beginning. Like, hey, we need to see this character go through more adversity here. And I'm like, okay, you're right, because now someone else is confirming that. So it's been super beneficial for me with beta readers.
Is there anything that you do specifically for your beta readers to kind of thank them in addition to community and feedback? Is there anything you do just to honor them for their help for you?
I do put them in like the acknowledgments. So they are in the acknowledgments of my story or at the end of the book. And I have been thinking of like giving them little packages too. I have a storefront for my Conjurer's Curse series. So that's in my mind too, to probably the second book do that also, like send like a mug or bookmarks, different things like that to say thank you. Because yeah, they do a lot and it's of their own time. They're not paid to do this. They just enjoy reading. And yeah, so I definitely appreciate them. So yes.
And for the authors listening, then how would you recommend setting up a beta reader group? Is there any little tips that you'd suggest?
I think whatever platform you're on, if you prefer Facebook or you prefer Instagram, I've seen both, where doing like a Facebook page just for your book, and it can be like the hype crew for whatever the title of your book is. And so you invite these readers into that private page and you can interact with them and they can give you feedback as the story goes. I have another author friend who uses Instagram, and so she will do her street team just through Instagram message. So you're invited to that. And anytime there's an update, she'll put information there or posts that need to be made about upcoming release dates or cover reveals. So I've seen those work really well. Some people will just do through email. So you sign up to be on their street team, launch team, and it's just through a newsletter that way. So I am currently thinking which route I want to take for the second book that's coming out in December. ARCs, the advanced reader copies are already out, but I'm still a few months away from release. So I may do Facebook just because that's the platform I've been on the longest.
Okay.
And I feel like the pages are pretty easily organized.
Again, around the idea of a launch, then, any suggestions for authors around launching your book? What's worked for you, and what are you thinking about maybe for a book for the next one?
I think setting up interviews ahead of time is a great thing to do. Again, starting a street team ahead of time, so that way you've got people who are reading the book who then can leave early reviews on Goodreads, and it's just an easy way to remind them then when the launch happens, like, hey, put your review on Amazon. So at least like the day your book comes out, you've got some people that guaranteed are going to leave reviews. So that's why it's not going to hurt you. Definitely. It's not going to hurt to do some legwork ahead of time. Booking some book signings. If you've got some bookstores, like local ones, you can set that up months in advance. I did that with Barnes and Nobles. My local one is amazing. I think I went a couple months ahead of time and just met with the person who arranges the book signings. They ordered the books. So I had like 2 set up because it can feel really overwhelming when the launch day happens. It can be really stressful, but if you've got things laid out ahead of time, you know what you're doing as that first month of the book being out organized, I think it'll just help your brain a bit.
Okay, so here's a curveball for you. I, like you, identify as an introvert. I'm not a big fan of big crowds and all those big events we're talking about around a launch party. Any tips for us introverts about how to be out there in public, being the focus of attention in a big group of people when we're not really a big fan of that? Any little tips for us? I'm with you on this one.
It stretches me a lot to do that because, again, I don't like being the center of attention, but I figure smile a lot. That's like my fallback. Just smile a bunch. And it's an exciting moment when you're there in a bookshop for a signing and you've posted it, you've made an event on Facebook or Instagram, so people are going to come. And, I got a lot of support at my first signing, a lot of friends and family, and then a bunch of people who were just in the store that I didn't know. So it helped to see some familiar faces to encourage me at the beginning. So as time went by and here's people I don't know, I was able to come out of my shell and say, hey, come check out my book. Do you like fantasy? Check this out. It can feel a little uncomfortable, but you've done something amazing. You have written a book, and that is something the vast majority of people will probably never do. And so I think when you're at a signing, people are just kind of floored. You wrote something. So just enjoy that feeling. That's what I say. Just enjoy it. Enjoy that feeling and smile.
And maybe put some time in your calendar after the event to recuperate. Because I know for me, if I back-to-back my calendar dates and I have something big or I'm out in public and then I have something else right next to it, I don't have any time to recuperate, recharge my batteries. Extroverts, they go to a big event, they get energized and their cup is overflowing with excitement because they just love the energy. And for us, it just drains us. So we need time to recuperate, recharge, right?
That is so important. So I would say kind of space it out. If you think doing 2 book signings in 1 month is too much, just do 1 and do the second one for the next month. So I think in the first 6 months of my book coming out, I had, because it was in December and I found that bookstores are like, no, it's craziness during Christmas time. So we don't do any signings during that. So it's like, okay, fine. We'll do January. So I did one in January, and then I did one in April, and then I did a author talk at the library in June. I also did I did an author talk in January. So I had 2 events in the same month. That was a little stressful for me. So I decided, in the future, 1 big event a month, no more than, just to kind of give myself space, because I will kind of stress when something's coming up. And then I feel useless for actually doing the day-to-day writing or editing that I need to do.
Okay, so I have a question for you here near the end that I want to ask you. But before I go there, I want to get your contact information for everybody and how they can be in touch with you, where you want to send people online, social-wise, website. Can you kind of fill in the blanks? We'll put it in the show notes, but just let everybody know where you're most active.
So I am on Facebook, Twitter, I guess it's X now. Instagram, TikTok. And I have a website, but the easiest way to find me is just to go to Linktree/Stephanie Cotta. All of my socials are there and one easy place.
There you go. Easy to do. Now, as far as editing, that's kind of your background. You help authors, you work with people. Any tips from your perspective on what you know and what you do to help authors that can help our listening audience? Can you give us some ideas of what it's like to work with someone like you and some of the services that you offer as well?
So I do proofreading and I work as a copy editor. So my expertise is pretty much like grammar and noticing misspellings of words, punctuation errors. And I will really notice when things are not in the active voice. So when I do receive a manuscript where I am going to be the copy editor for it, so I will be the last person who sees it and I'm going line by line. I'm looking for development stuff also just to make sure everything's in line. But I really don't like to see so many sentences in passive voice, and that is using structure like was. Every once in a while, it's fine to just deliver a sentence with was if you need to get a fact out there fast. But I really encourage writers to spend time going through your manuscript several times. Really look at how you can use a stronger verb than what you have, change it to an active verb. Make sure your characters are doing the action as opposed to like a force or something being acted upon the character. This will just help keep your voice strong from the character's point of view. So those are the big things I look at. So I think it's often said you should have probably gone through your manuscript 10 times before the final editor sees it. Yeah. So omitting things like she heard, she felt, she realized, she saw, those are the type of things like, I see that and I want to go X, let's restructure the sentence. We want everything to be from the character doing that action, as opposed to, it feels like a distance. It feels like if you say she heard or she felt this way, I'm like, just say what it is, as opposed to kind of giving us a filler or a filter word. So those are some of my tips.
It's interesting. It almost feels like a commentary about the action that's happening rather than the action actually just happening.
Yes. It's like,
right.
Tell me the action, or just like, tell me the sound that they heard. Don't tell me she heard it. I will know, because I'm in that character's head and in their point of view. I will know they heard it if you just say what the sound is, if that makes sense. It's like, you can just cut out she heard and tell me the sound. Yeah. It's simple. That's the thing. They're really simple fixes. And once you get it in your head, then it's like, it'll just translate and you'll naturally start doing it.
What a great way to end off. I love that. There's authors going, I'm going to go back and check my book and read it again. I've only read it once. I got 9 more times to read it over. But that's great. A great source of information. I love that. Anything else, Stephanie, that we haven't really covered that you're like, I think we should just mention this before we go?
I'd like to end by encouraging aspiring writers that if you haven't started your story and it's been on your mind and in your heart to write this for years, just start. And do not compare yourself when you first start. I didn't know what I was doing when I started, but I just had a story that needed to come out and characters who had a voice that needed to be told. So just start, and you never know where it's gonna lead you. And it may be a 10-year journey, or it may be like in 2 years you've got something and it's going to be published on a bookshelf one day. So you never know. Don't discount yourself.
Beautiful. What a great way to end. Everyone, all the information for Stephanie, her amazing line of books that you can get, and information about what's coming next. Everything's all included in the show notes, as well a link to Stephanie and Angela's podcast, which you must listen to because it is just so much fun. And you'll learn a lot from two good friends going back and forth and talking all things writing. So a great podcast to listen to as well. You're done listening to this episode. Jump right over there now and subscribe and follow their podcast as well. Stephanie, thank you so much for being part of the podcast. So glad to have you here. And again, as a listener to your show, I'm excited to listen to the next episode. Keep them coming because you guys do a great job.
Thank you so much.
Jumping here at the very end, I want to thank you for coming. We have listeners around the world, and I got to tell you, as a podcaster, it is so great to hear back from the people who listen to the show. Now, you are still here. The podcast's over. Like, we're sweeping up and putting the chairs away. You're still here. So, hi. I would love to talk to you. No, I really, really would. I would love to hear your voice. I would love to hear from you through email. You can do all that at livingthenextchapter.com. I say it fast because I love it. Living the Next Chapter. It's the name of the podcast. .com. How's that for easy? Right? Right. So come on over there and let's have a conversation. You can set up time in my calendar. You can, air quote here, book time in my calendar, book next chapter. Let's have a conversation. Thanks for being here. See you on the next one. Cheers.